Tom Kenny here, who is going to give the slideshow on Galway, is synonymous with history in Galway.
All the names are there. Incidentally, if anybody wants copies of these photographs, ask me later because we can make copies if anybody would like any of them. All the names are there. You can see Ken Dexter, Joe Costello, Johnny Greeley, Gail Lee, Sean McHugh, Cody Gill, Eugene O'Connor, Tommy Greeley, and Sean Lyden. Seated then are Des Nolan, Dermot Lovett, Jimmy Clancy, who was the captain, Patsy O'Sullivan, and Jimmy Cogovan, and in front are Gay Silt and Eamon O'Malley. The big trinity, that's the one that, or at least that's the result that Tommy Greeley remembered. This is an aerial photograph of UCG, which is down on the bottom of the right. This was taken in the early 60s, at the time when we were all in college, really. The ridged roofs buildings that you see on the left, that was the ammunitions factory, and that's the building that we're actually in today. And you can see the entire campus is on that photograph, and it's only a small part of the photograph. At the bottom on the right is where the medical faculty was. In the middle is the engineering building. There was a kind of a small arts building. The new arts building has just been built, and in under the trees, under the quad, is the coffee shop that was there, built in our time. It was extended in our time. This is another 5960 colours team. Can you read all the names there, or do you want me to read them out for you? Jerry Little is top of the left. P.G. O'Dwyer, who came from Garbally, Billy Glynn from the Bish, Millie Lynch from the Bish, Pádraig Cass from Delasal, Waterford. I didn't know whether that was a mistake or not. Sean Deely from Garbally, Sean Lyden. In the middle row are Mickey Braw, that's all he was known as. He went to the Bish, the poor fella. Niall Dignan from Clongowes, Dermot Murphy from Garbally, Johnny Greeley, who went to the Jazz, that's why he was the captain, without question. Joe Lang in Garbally, and Luke Clancy, the Bish, and Liam Silk is at the end of the line. And in front then are Eamon O'Malley and Gail Cook, who also went to the Bish, both of them. So this was the 59-60 colours team. This is the quad. And the main feature, the reason I brought this photograph along is that the door over on the right was known as Paddy Liver's door. Some of you might remember he would come up and he would say, John Murphy, pass. Tom Kenny, oh, reject, I beg your pardon. Mr. Roche knows more about this than me, so he has just corrected me. But this was the aula, this was in the times that were in it, covered in ivy. It was magnificent, and it still is, by the way, in the autumn with autumn colours. This was Pete Curran. Now, some of the angelic people that are here tonight mightn't recognise him, but those of us who did a lot of our education in the men's club will remember that he was the guy in charge of it there. He was the guy that opened the billiard room, the card room, gave out the boats, and we went up the River Coolton and so on. Pete Curran was his name, and he knew everybody. This is another 61-62 team. It's not the best photograph, but it's a very interesting one because of the personnel. So here we did chemistry. Those of you who did pre-med would have known about this particular school. It was a very antiquated kind of a place. It was a Protestant school at the end of the 19th century and into the 20th century, and then it was taken over by the Patrician Brothers and finally by UCG. It's completely gone now, this building, but it was a very elegant building, and there was one big lecture theatre in it where we all went to chemistry lectures. This was the old engineering building. It was almost there in isolation. It was a major part of the campus. It wouldn't take in the first years today with the kind of numbers that are doing engineering today. In fact, there's quite a stunning new engineering building just been opened literally in the last 12 months here on the campus. But this is what it was like in the 60s. The numbers were, of course, very small. When we were in college in the early 60s, the student numbers went over 1,000 for the first time. So it was a big building, I suppose, for the time. I've included this photograph because it just shows how very close to international level some of the UCG players were at the time. This is a combined universities versus rest of Ireland, a game that was played in January in Donnybrook. Now this was essentially a final trial, which is what they used to have in those days. And you'll be glad to see that there are two UCG representatives on it. That's Eamon Maguire and Johnny Greeley. Both wonderful players. Eamon got the caps. Unfortunately, Johnny didn't. We all thought he should have, but he didn't. I think that's the game where a reporter said that Johnny Greeley ran like a gazelle. He wasn't very effective, but he ran like a gazelle. Anyway, it's a lovely photograph, and again, it's just to show just how strong the college team was at the time. This was originally built as the sports pavilion in UCG, and it later became a coffee shop. In the late 40s and early 50s, this was the coffee shop, indeed into about 1960. It's very hard to believe that this was the only facility on the campus for students and professors and staff alike, but that was the size of it. It changed then in the 60s, and this lady took over. This was Ma Craven, and she took no prisoners. She loved you or she hated you. Oh, Jesus, you couldn't keep your arse in the seat for too long when she was around. Whether you were the president or the first year, she told you how many classes you had to go to, etc. But she was wonderful, and she was probably just the kind of person that that place needed. The coffee shop was greatly extended in her time, but she ran it like, they say the Arden Lady died last week, but this was the forerunner to the Arden Lady as far as those of us in the 60s were concerned. Another team, but this is the Connacht 15. Now the reason I have shown this photograph is because there are a lot of UCG personnel on this team. And it's very sad to think that today there are no college representatives on the Connacht team. That college don't even have a senior team. I mean, in those days, there were less than 1,000 students in this college, and still there are Mickey Broderick, Luke Clancy, I'm just going to go through what I think are the UCG ones, Johnny Greeley, Eamon Maguire, Dermot Murphy, Noel Carpenter. All of those UCG, 6, yeah, and not one today, and it's very sad to think that with a student population of 16,000, 17,000, that they don't even play senior rugby anymore. I hope that changes for them fairly soon. This was the closest pub to college, well known, I'm sure, to a few of you. Probably enjoyed part of your education there. It was also handy because sometime after this photograph was taken, a bookies shop opened on the left-hand side. It was on the corner of Eglinton Street and Mary Street. And it was a great GAA house and a great rugby house. And great fun, a great sporting kind of a pub. And I'm sure there are lots of guys here who probably had their first pint in that establishment. This was another college bar, the Skeff. You can see that the advertisement tells us it's spacious and relaxing. It was actually very tiny, but it was a great place. It was a great pint of stout. There were a few students around at the time who used to try and kind of take the mickey and steal barrels of porter and you know, things like that, and then proclaim their innocence. They weren't all hurlers, but Funnily enough, Corla of the Eagle Eye knew exactly who was involved. She mightn't have been able to prove it, but she knew. Martin and Tommy, if I remember, were the two barmen in that place. It was a great pint of stout, and the food was actually very good. And the restaurant in at the back had probably the best steak in Galway. You can see that it was centrally heated in those days. This is a hospital team, a UCG hospital team. I don't know the year of this. This is the team that played Vincent's Hospital. And again, I'll run through the names here. Dermot Murphy at the back, Noel Brown, Eugene O'Connor, Mick Malloy, Joe Fox, Bomber Brown, Joe Costello, and Kieran Frame. And in front are Eamon O'Toole, Des Berry, Luke Clancy, Johnny Brealey, Sean O'Grady, John O'Donnell, and Jerry Clarity. One of the funny things, by the way, I had a photograph in the Galway Advertiser last week of the three teams that we showed at the top of this. And a lot of Galwegians thought, for Jesus' sake, that fella never played rugby. Did you ever think he'd ever be on a pitch and that kind of stuff? And I'm not suggesting this about any of the personnel in this photograph, I'm merely telling you what the response on the street was. But again, that's a very powerful hospital team. In fact, on that three-team photograph that we had, it's interesting to look at the number of people who did medicine that were on those three teams. This was the aula in our time. This is where we did exams mostly, sometimes distracted by naked statues on either side of the aula of pretty large men and large women, and they tended to distract when you were trying to do a physics paper or a maths paper or whatever. It looks very small there. It's actually divided in two now. It's on two levels, which is a great pity, I think, because there was quite an elegance about it in those days. It was by far the biggest room in college in our day, and that's where the degrees were handed out. And when you think of it, the Bailey Allen Hall, I mean, is 20 times the size of this today. It's a totally different place. This was William Street, and I'm only showing it because of how Galway has changed, really. This is early 60s photograph. It was raining back in those days. There was traffic on the street. It wasn't pedestrianised, and furthermore, the traffic went two ways. This would have been taken from Dillon's Corner, and it's totally changed since. It's been completely changed, especially by pedestrianisation, and it's a lot more attractive now. Actually, there was a lot of ugly neon signs and things like that there in those days. It's a lot more attractive now, but not as easy to do business in sometimes. It was probably busier then than it is today. Now, this is another college team. This is getting into the 60s, and there are big changes in personnel here. This is, I think, 67. I'm not 100% sure. And again, I go through the personnel for you. In the back row on the left is Phil Murray, then Hilary Lawless, Eamon O'Toole, Sean Keneally, who sadly passed away about 12 months ago, George Garland, Brian Jennings, Frank Curran, Jack Geary, and Luke Clancy. And in front are Billy Hertridge, Frankie Deasy, Tony Corley, Leo Ryan, who was, Lex Ryan, I beg your pardon, who was then the president, Mick Malloy, Dermot Murphy, Liam Carroll, Christy Callery, and Liam Hayes. Another formidable team. I mean, it was an extraordinary, powerful club in the 60s when we think of it. All of the trophies that they won, and even when they weren't winning, they were very close to it a lot of the times. A lot of wonderful rugby players there, and of course, with Mick Malloy, a great international, who was a great ambassador indeed for the club and for the game. This was the library. This photograph was taken a little bit before our time, but actually the library hadn't changed a bit. This is exactly what it looked like. it was very tiny and not really a very inefficient place. It was a place where one tried to get into to study. A lot of people would have fallen asleep then with their heads on the tables instead of actually studying. But you'd be woken up and shaken up and by some of the personnel in the library. But it was very small. I mean, this is virtually the entire length of the library as we knew it. It's a totally different place today. It's on a massive scale compared to what we were used to. This was college taken a day or two after Delhi in 1961. We got the tail end of a hurricane here, and it blew a lot of slates off roofs, knocked down walls, caused floods, knocked down a huge amount of trees. People were without electricity for a long time. And it had a major effect on the landscape around UCG, as you can see. A lot of trees knocked down there and changed the landscape for quite a while, in fact. This was Ma Driscoll. She was the ladies' dean and probably should be in the Guinness Book of Records for doing more to preserve virginity in the west of Ireland than anybody else in the entire world. She used to sit with Father Tom Kine on the left-hand balcony in Sea Point, up near the stage, with the box of chocolates and the cup of tea between them. But if you were down on the floor, and if you got a bit too close to the girl beside you or in front of you, she was down like a shot and telling you that, no, you can't do that. And I do know she approached the college ladies rowing crew at one stage, and she told them that they had to wear shorts instead of skirts. And the stroke of the crew said, "Who said that?" "Father Kine," she said. "Is that because he wants to look up our skirts? Or is it because is that why we have to wear a skirt instead of shorts?" So that ended that little contretemps. They wore shorts from then on. But she was a wonderful lady, really, and loved us all, I think. I've used this photograph to show that not all rugby players were confined just to that sport. And you'll see a few guys like Gerard Clarity, Eamon Maguire, Paddy Fox and Steve Cunningham in there, who all played with the college here, but who were very good oarsmen as well, part of the Galway rowing club crew in this particular case. Rúcháin Haney is the man on the left in the front. He was quite famous. His son was also called Rúcháin. He went to St. Patrick's School, and one of the brothers came into his dad, the man in the photograph, one day, and said, "You're going to have to do something about that son of yours. He's using terrible bad language in school." "Well, the little bollocks, he didn't fucking learn that in this house." He was a very famous character, and he looks it actually there, I have to say. This was, again, to show that not all people who played rugby for college actually were confined to that sport. There were a few rugby players in there. I only got this photograph yesterday evening, so I didn't have a chance to name them all, but you can see Mick Roche on the right in the centre, and Frank Curran beside him. Mick Roche was a high jumper. I find that very hard to believe for a big second row forward, but apparently he was a very good and agile one. Gus O'Gorman is in the front, centre, and beside him on the left is Eamon Quinn, and beside him on the left of that again is Sean Murphy. On the left-hand side of the centre row is Tom Gilmore. The guy second from the right at the back is Pádraig Hogan, and the man to his left with the glasses is Pádraig Griffin from Leitrim, who was an extremely eccentric man, very involved in athletics. I think he probably represented Ireland in an administrative sense for a long time. He was in digs when he was in college in St. Mary's Road, and every night before going to bed, he would open the curtains of his bedroom and open the window, and he would sing the national anthem to anybody who was going up and down St. Mary's Road at the time. For what reason, I'm not sure, but that's what made him eccentric, I suppose.
Are you joking us now, Tom?
No, I'm not joking, you know. That's what I heard. I have to tell you. This is another college team, 1970, we think. Some people actually can't remember the dates when they played games, but that's understandable, I suppose. Frank Howard was the referee. No can do, that's right, no can do. You would probably remember that. He was the ref at the time. Johnny McElwain, Liam Carroll, Alec Blaney, John Cunningham, Ryan Jennings, Michael Flynn, Noel Murphy and Christy Callery. And in front are Tony Corley, Fergal O'Garra, Seamus Dennison, who was the vice captain, Phil Murray, who was the captain, Tony Corley, Donald O'Byrne and Liam Hayes. Fergal O'Garra, of course, is the father of Ronan O'Garra, and we met him, Mick Roche and myself, one day. We were going into Lansdowne Road, and it happened to be Ronan's first cap. And we met Fergal and his wife, but they were so nervous and terrified of what might happen. They were actually going in the wrong stand. I would have thought he would have thrown his way around there, but anyway, he didn't, unfortunately. Now, some few of you might have been lucky enough to go into Galway's first nightclub. It had a very exotic name of the Casbah. It was run by two sisters, Dilly on top and Nora at the bottom. Nora used to be at the door. This was in Key Street, and the door was always locked. You had to knock on the door and she'd say, "Who's out? Who's out? Who's out?" And you had to say that you were a surgeon or a barrister or a solicitor or something like that. If you were in college, you had a better chance of getting in. Gillian was the one who did the cooking. Now, what they sold were soup and crew beans and chips. The tablecloths were pages of the Irish Press or the Independent or the Common Tribune. Gillian used to be stirring the pot and occasionally she'd have a drink. People only really went in there after closing time. And to be honest, you need about 12 pints in you to be able to stomach the food. But Gillian would be stirring the pot and she'd get a few jars and she'd start to sing. I am a Credabort man, right humble is my calling. Night and day round Galway Bay in my small little boat I'm trawling. And her teeth would fall out and fall into the pot. And meanwhile there'd be a knock on the door. Who's out? Who's out? Dr. Tom Kenny. So she'd open the door, come in. What would you like? Now, I'd have a bowl of soup, please. And meanwhile, the chef would be fishing her teeth out of the soup and then serving it. Now, Nicky Heaslip, who played for another club, he once, as he said himself, shifted a gorgeous bird from Dublin. And he said, would you like to go to Galway's first nightclub? And she said, oh yeah. So he brought her into the Casbah and she said to him, where's the ladies? Jesus, he says, I haven't a clue. Will you go over to the door and ask Nora? So Nora opened the door and she pointed out to her in a very loud voice, do you see that lane across the road down there? Well, you don't go down there at all because that's where all the lads go. You go down around the back of McDonald's fish shop. There'll be nobody watching you down there at all. You're fine. Nora, I met Nora once.
I never knew, Tom, I never knew.
Not everybody got into that place, I have to tell you. Nora was in a queue once in Pat Taft's pub on Christmas Eve. There weren't very many off-licenses there at the time, and the queue was going out the door. And Nora got to the top of the queue anyway, and she said, could I have a bottle of Padda, please, Mr. Taft? So he picked up the bottle of Padda, and he was about to put it into a bag, and she said, could you ever take the alcohol out of it? What do you mean? Well, you see, it's a Christmas present for Dilly, and she doesn't drink at all. It was a really special place, I have to say. A very hilarious kind of a place. Most people don't really remember a lot of the visits they had in there, but it was great, and it's probably just as well. The two ladies are sadly dead now, unfortunately. This was a college choir in the 60s. You might recognize some of the people there. I have to say, most of those personnel that are involved in that choir did not join for the joys of singing. They really joined for the joys of potential sex. That's what they were all hoping for, at least. But you can see that they won at least one cup. This was taken in Limerick in the early 60s. There was a few there, a few of us probably lusted after, I have to say. And I'm sure they lusted after us as well. In a place like this is the Hangar Ballroom. A lot of us would have gone there, obviously. Great fun. They had probably the finest dancing floor in the country. They had terrific bands. Sea Point had all the elegance and the luxury and everything. The Hangar didn't have anything like that, but it was a very, very lively place and great fun, I have to say. Great fun. It was actually an airplane hangar. It was used by the RAF. They had a place out near Ordenmore, and when they left, this was taken in here, and a lot of dances were on there until the early 60s. And this was the Astoria, where we all went to the cinema. A lot of us would have done our courting there. Some of us would have started off in the Fours, which was the fourpennies down the front row, at the cereals or the Follier Uppers on Sunday afternoons. The place jam-packed, mad-packed. But we would have graduated to the double seats upstairs as we got into our kind of college days. It's absolutely gone now. It was kind of a palace of dreams, but it's all changed utterly. This photograph, as you can see from the van in the foreground, was taken a little before our time. This was a group of college students who rolled a barrel from Galway to Dublin. It's very interesting if you look at the sign there on the barrel that says "Help the Hungry." There was actually a subtitle to this. It's not there. It was "Help the Thirsty." And all of the thirsty are actually in the photograph. They drank their way across the country. But they, in fairness, they collected an awful lot of money as well. You can see the names of them there. Tom Brown, Paddy Fox, Paddy Donoghue, I'm not sure, is it John Muldowney, Pete Phelan and Eamon Maguire, and in the centre is Paddy Ryan. They actually did it for 2 years running. They collected an awful lot of money, and they had an absolute ball. And you know, in those days in college, there weren't a huge amount of kind of extracurricular activities like these going on. This is the bottom of Quay Street, and this is taken in the 60s. And I'm showing you this just merely to show you how the city has changed utterly, really. This area now is known as the Latin Quarter, and it is a thriving, throbbing place full of life, and cafes and pubs and people out drinking on the streets, and you know, there's a huge amount of pedestrian traffic in it and a lot of fun. And it's the same amount of traffic almost in the middle of the night as there is in the middle of the day. But it's a kind of a cultural quarter. There's a tremendous buzz about it today, but none of that was there in those days. It was derelict and drab and not very colourful, really. This was a CTM college team, the Students' Union college team, and they played a game against the staff in about 1963 or 64. Now the reason I've actually shown this, I'm not going to name everybody in it, but there are 3 people in it who went on to significant careers. Frank Flannery, who was a very major figure in Fine Gael. He is third in from the left on that back row. Pat Rabbit, who is second from the right at the back row. And the captain is Seamus Brennan, who of course was Fianna Fáil. So it was Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and Labour. And really it's a kind of an example of how we were all like a kind of a small unit, a happy family back in those days. But we all went very much in different ways, different directions. And that was certainly the case with this lot. And this is the extremely handsome and hairy Phil Murray. I have to say, his towels or sweater don't look like they've been worked in very much, but he did captain the team, so there must have been 14 great guys on the team. 1970. Anyway, it's a good note, I think, to finish this on, getting the cup in the sports ground. And I think it ended what must have been a really wonderful decade for UCG Rugby Club. So, thanks a million, guys. That's it.